least, just in case something
Yeah, I'm downloading one
unexpected.
to Drive, my Google Drive.
I'd even put it on a second place too if it came on the disk or something, just in case.
Or email it to myself, download
Yeah,
an email.
I know I've never heard of Google Drive losing anything, but I mean, still, it's always good. As an illustrator, that's one of the first things I learned through painful experiences, back up, back up, back up, back up to the point of paranoia, back up your stuff, because if you don't, you'll get caught in something you didn't expect, and then boom, you've lost your files.
Yeah, that is absolutely, that's exactly why I do a lot of my stuff on Google Docs, because it automatically saves everything for me.
My first book, I actually think I had to redo completely from scratch 4 illustrations because my computer crashed and I lost 4 illustrations completely. I had a whole bunch of problems cropped up at once, and those files were completely gone. So I had to redraw them from scratch.
Oh, geez.
And so I learned from that point on, always, even while you're working, keep. I should save this for the interview.
We're live now, so they're catching it anyway.
Oh,
we went live like,
I
don't know, 30 seconds a minute ago.
Do we actually have people?
I don't know if anybody's watching yet, but we're live, so even if they catch the replay, they're going to catch up with us.
I'll wait until, let me know when people are there, and then I'll explain why I'm wearing gloves, just because so it doesn't drive them nuts the whole interview. Well, because it'll distract them. So just let me know when people are on, and then I'll explain real quick. I have a very good reason, but I'll explain why I'm wearing the gloves.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know.
When I do,
a lot of times people can't catch things live and they come back for the replay. So we'll just make sure that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you go ahead, introduce yourself and tell us about the gloves. Let's get rolling.
Just go for it.
Yep, just go for it. If somebody asks later, or we can always revisit it when somebody pops on. But
sure. So my name is Michael P. Burke. I'm an author and illustrator, and overall artist. And if you get distracted by these gloves, it's just for eczema, skin condition. So that's why I'm wearing this. It just really helps keep the moisture and keeps, if anybody, a lot of people have eczema these days, or, dermatitis. So it's just a quick fix to help any breakouts and stuff. So it just keeps everything in check for me. So dry skin.
Gotcha. And I mean, it makes sense in the era of COVID too. It's got a double whammy helpful.
Exactly. Well, that's what's made it hard to get these gloves now, because before I had full access in the stores to these gloves, and since COVID, the shelves are empty. So now you got to find someone who knows someone to get the good gloves, the hospital gloves. So.
Oh, good. Are they still? Because I remember buying some in the early stages of the pandemic. Are they still just off the shelves, wiped out?
Yeah, I think the companies are just shipping them now straight to the hospitals, because they're not even on the shelves anymore. Not this hospital cheaper kinds and latex kinds and other kinds, but this specific.
Yeah, sending to the hospitals makes sense. I hadn't even thought of that. I was just thinking people buying. You are now choppy. You're cutting in and out a little bit. Or a lot of it.
So we must have an internet. So I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything you said.
No, that's all right. I didn't hear much of what you said there either. Oh, internet issues. I was just saying it makes a lot more sense. I had just thought of people panic buying the gloves still, but it makes sense if they're sending it to the hospitals. That hadn't occurred to me.
Well, that did happen at first, but now they just don't even hit this specific hospital type, which I'm drawing a blank on what this material is called, but it's a very specific material to the hospitals. So those type, they were grabbed off the shelf right away, as you said, when the pandemic hit. But since then, they're not even on the shelves now. I think the companies are just shipping straight to probably hospitals and other places.
So. Gotcha. Alrighty. Well, so now we know why you've got the gloves. Nobody's going to be distracted. Yeah. So, okay, and we know a little bit about you, but how did you get into illustration in the first place? Let's try and stay I know you and I both go off track and
Right.
distracted on other topics, but we'll try and keep it kind of to the topic at hand. And how did you get into that in the first place?
Well, it really, as funny as it sounds, pretty much from birth, me and my twin brother were artists. So, like the very first memory, well, I don't have the memory, it's a story I was told, but when we were just babies, my parents left my sisters in charge of us. My sisters, they were tweens at the time. They they left us too long in the crib. They didn't check on us or anything. We were in there a long time. And when they had come in, we had very artistically and creatively created this entire mural across the wall. I mean, abstract, but really artistic. And we only had one material at hand to do it, and you could probably guess what that was.
Oh.
We were reaching into our diapers and we were creating murals on the wall, but artistic. We were creating. We weren't just like acting out. We were actually creating. Yeah, that's that. We didn't have crayons, but we knew we wanted to create, and that's what we did. We did it together, and yeah, my parents were blown away. My sisters were really upset because for some reason, I guess maybe punishment, they weren't watching us close enough. They were forced to wash the walls, so they don't like that story. They're still pissed to this day that they had to clean that up. So
amazing story.
So yeah, right from birth, pretty much. And then from there, once we stopped doing that and we started walking and talking and knowing what a pencil was, then the next stage for my mom was we were driving her nuts because we were doodling and drawing on everything in the house, bills, the phone book, tabletops. I mean, we were really young. We didn't have boundaries, so we were drawing on everything. So my mom was forced. She grew up in the Depression, so, and she, it was a large family of 7 kids, so she was always, watching the money. So she finally had to crack and buy us, pencil, crayons, and paper. So
lots of paper.
Yeah. So then that was it. And because we were on limited means, we didn't get any formal art education. The first real art course was a free one my mom saw in the paper at this local college, a 1-day art course for children. So she sent us there, and he was a great artist. He taught us some of the fundamentals of how to draw a face and sketching and that kind of thing. And that was it. Other than then we took art in high school and stuff. For us, it's mostly just been natural and self-taught. So
that's fantastic. So what led you to like illustrating children's books? What drew you to that versus other avenues of art?
Well, I kind of just slipped into it. Well, basically, once I got, like a lot of artists, I'm sure can relate to, a lot of society in the world tells you, right, and I heard it, you can't make a living as an artist, which isn't, of course, true. It can be true, but it's certainly tough, like any other profession, but it's not an absolute. Mm-hmm. But of course, we're often told that as if it is an absolute. And so we kind of eased. We still did art always. We were always artists, but we didn't really look into doing it professionally or anything like that until really adulthood. And so, like after high school and stuff. So it wasn't actually, believe it or not, it wasn't until I was maybe my early to mid 30s that I really. I was in management for many years, and the company that I had worked for and that I had managed a restaurant, had sold out, and so the whole thing, my whole plans there, my professional plans kind of fell through. So I was kind of at a midlife crisis, you could say.
Yeah.
And so I started the art again. I hadn't really done, except for occasionally just, for fun. I hadn't really doodled or drawn, but I haven't really done anything serious, and I had never tried painting. And my mom has done paintings before she got married and had kids, she painted. So I was always interested in it. So I decided since I didn't know which direction to go, I thought, you know what, I'm going to teach myself to paint. So I started doing that. I started watching, who Bob Ross is, the guy on TV with the afro. Are you too young? You know who he is?
With the happy little trees and the happy little clouds. And I love it.
Yeah, and for some people that don't know that, he was a guy in the 70s who had a painting show on PBS. He was a hippie. He had literally a live squirrel sometimes in his pocket, pet squirrel. And yeah, he was a fun hippie guy that taught you how to paint landscapes in oils in a technique that he didn't create. Many people created it, but he's more famous for it. And that's this wet on wet technique, but you've probably seen his other artists you've seen on PBS, and they show you how to do landscapes. And it's using oils, and you put wet paint on top of wet paint. And it's for anybody can learn. I mean, it's basically by using certain shapes of knives and turning them in certain directions to create trees and mountains. So, I did. I watched all kinds of those, and then just taught myself. And my progression, once I got into it, all that artistic energy just came flooding out because I was finally doing what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah. How was that whole management thing as an artist? How did you handle, like, energetically, emotionally, like the 9 to 5?
I drank too much coffee. I smoked too many cigarettes. I hadn't smoked for a long time. I'm long since quit, but back then I saw too much smoking, too much coffee, too much rest. So it was a blessing in disguise that it all, the universe took me where I needed to go.
Yeah.
So I recognized that. So I took that opportunity. And once I got a couple months in, then another ability that I always had that I didn't recognize was I thought I could teach this to people. And so my father was actually really supportive normally. He, though, at the time wasn't that supportive just because it took him by surprise. And when I told him, I was surprised because he always grew up from saying, you can do anything you want, put your mind to it. And he meant it, and that's truly who he was. But he was also old school, who also, followed the rules and, believe your government, do what you're told and just follow the rules. They don't make sense. So he was kind of both worlds. And I guess that kind of aspect of himself up, and he actually surprised me and said, you can't just be a teacher. You need a diploma. You can't just teach art course. So being in my personality, I said, want that. So that fueled me a little more. And I did. Yes. So I did. And I actually, I just jumped in with no experience, and I started posting for art workshops, and I got a bunch of people at a little local library. And I have to say, I was surprised because I didn't even prepare very much. I mean, I prepared, but I didn't prepare what we were going to paint, like what exact landscape. I don't know why, but something kept saying, just hold on. So, I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out, of course, being my first time, and certainly that I didn't know what we were going to paint. Within about 5 minutes, I felt like I'd been teaching my whole life. And so that's when I realized I'm a natural teacher. Mm-hmm. So the art
too, because you taught yourself, which I think probably helped set you up for teaching others.
Totally, absolutely. And it was always a natural inclination, but I never saw it as a teacher. But I was always the one at workplaces that the boss would say, "You go train these people," or we're in school, the teacher would say, "Here, you kind of organize these couple people over here," and so people did see that in me, but I didn't really recognize it as being a teacher. Mm-hmm. So that, I know this is getting a little longer. Don't worry, we're getting back on track here. But that's basically, I got back into the art, and then with that came the inspiration for teaching, and I ended up, now to date, I've taught over 300 students to paint. So I've basically retired from that. I still get some students wanting me to come back to it, but now I just want to focus just on the children's books and illustrating and writing. But I did that for many years, and so yeah, that's what happened. Is basically midlife crisis turned into me teaching myself to paint and becoming a teacher. Even then, selling my works at festivals and stuff, and that worked out for a while. So that's how I got into being a real artist, to answer your question.
That's awesome. No, it's
And then
an incredible
but what
journey.
another yeah, and then another thing that came up that I did while I was, which I should have, because I'm a storyteller from a family of storytellers. And I was told you're a good storyteller. Something in my brain, maybe it's again with that whole art thing. I never equated being a good storyteller to being a writer. So I never knew I was a writer. It turns out I'm equally a writer, but I am an illustrator, which I love being now that I'm an author illustrator. That really works out well when you're equally both.
Yeah.
It just helps the symmetry. So I'm not a better illustrator than I've been doing art more, so I've been doing it longer, but I'm just, it's equal. So that came into place just by a crazy idea at 3 o'clock in the morning, where I just pictured, I woke up with a vision of a little girl under a big oak tree. And before I know it, a story started forming about that. And next thing I know, I'm lying in bed 3 hours now, not sleeping, and I'm writing an entire script. And it's amazing. And even the title hit me, and it's the title of my website, Flower and Giant. So even the title, which is a winning title, it hit me right away. So it was literally like a beam from the universe. Just went, here you go.
I love when that
And
happens.
that's when I discovered I was a writer. So I still didn't equate it officially that I'm going to be a writer now. I put it aside and I worked on it for, just in my spare time for years. And I was actually thinking more it was going to be for a manuscript for an animated movie. But as I kept with the art and as I kept over the years, and now decades, or another decade or so passes, and I'm teaching art and I'm doing all this kind of stuff, and I'm occasionally going back to it. That's when I realized, and then another, again, life, I was working for a corporation. So this was about 2006. Around 2006, another event beyond my control. I was working years at this corporation, a high-end corporation that works for the banks. And it was the first time I was working in a corporation. It was a real wake-up call, and it was toxic because it's a corporation. So not the best place for an artist. But as I was working there to try to relieve stress, I did start writing that script, which then I started realizing, instead of for a movie, an animated, it would make sense to make it as a children's first, and then maybe one day make it into a movie. So that's when I started to take it more seriously. Maybe one day I'll write a book. So it was still more of one day. But I was working on it. So, I work on a little bit here and there. Sometimes at work, I'd write ideas and stuff. And then that whole corporation got downsized to India, and with very little warning. So out of nowhere, we were all out of jobs. So the 200 of us were out of jobs. And so for a walk to clear, I really went to work that day, coffee in hand. Within 20 minutes, I was outside with that same coffee in my hand and my bags packed.
Oh no.
Not even, because they didn't even tell us. They tricked us into a false meeting, just a regular review, to then tell us you're gone. And then the manager would open the door and slide your bags in, and then you were officially walked out because they want to make sure that nobody freaked out. So we were all one by one, separately, one per hour. It's funny enough, I was the first one. I was one of the first ones out that on the first day. This happened over months, but I was one of the first ones. But I know why, because I rubbed a manager the wrong way by standing up for my team. So, but again, I won't digress into that. But so yeah, the universe, gave me a really medicinal boo-boo there. In that, obviously, I didn't expect or want to lose that career. So I'm walking, and I decided, because there was a trail nearby to my house. So I thought, I just still can't believe I'm just let go. So I just walked to the falls. It was this, I'm in Hamilton, by the way. If anybody doesn't know, I'm in Hamilton, Ontario, which, believe it or not, it's known for being a steel city, but it's actually the waterfall capital of the world.
Oh.
So we have the most waterfalls. So I walked to nearby waterfall, totally out of my mind what the heck just happened, coffee in hand, and then I saw in the falls the rock form this face. It looked like a feline. And I thought, God, that would be an amazing character for my book, Flower the Giant, which I'm still working on, by the way. So that's it's. I'll get into that later when we get into the book. But anyways, so yeah, that triggered it, and I knew I was going to be on unemployment. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to go on unemployment, and I'm going to finish this book. So boom, 2006. That's when I left from being just an artist and a teacher into actually going to write and illustrate. So the way I actually got into officially my first step into the professional world of illustrating, again, this is a progression, is I was on unemployment and I started. I didn't know at the time that publishing companies, well, I did know, but I kind of ignored it. But I ignored the fact that publishing companies, if you're submitting manuscripts, they don't want you submitting artwork because they like the TV, generally speaking. So, and any aspiring authors have probably learned that or heard that or will hear that as they continue
I've
to
done
learn
my
about
research. I learned that early on too. So, you write a
So
story and you're like, oh, I want to submit it. Should I have illustrations? Should I not have illustrations? Then you do your research and you discover that they just want the manuscript. They don't want the art already, mostly.
Exactly. And so I kind of heard that, but I kind of ignored it. And so I sent out my first manuscript. I sent to all the big publishing companies in the States and Canada, here in Canada. I submitted Flower and the Giant, which is, as is typical. Anybody who submitted knows that I got very few replies back, which is the case. Most companies don't even ever read them. They end up on a giant stack. And probably you already know this, and the audience probably knows, but in case they don't, basically the way they choose they choose themes. Their directions is by marketers. So marketers decide this year we're going to do books about frogs because frogs are in. We're going to do a book about this. So they already pigeonhole themselves into a handful of very specific ideas, and that's all they're looking for in the massive pile they get of manuscripts. So again, they only even get to see a fraction of them, usually interns. And even if they do, if it's not the 5 things they're looking for that year, if it's not about a squirrel that, does this, then forget it. So it's really difficult. So I didn't get a lot of responses. I did get a few, but this is how I got into professionally. Is a small company in Toronto. They decided not to. She didn't really get the book. It was a little too big for her to get. It is. It's a very ambitious book. It's very massive. It's very Lord of the Rings kind of size book. So she didn't quite get it, but she loved my illustrations. So she said, "I've got a book coming up. Can I hire you as an illustrator?" So although that didn't pay off all that sending them out, and never really did. Although you never know, they sit on it for years, so who knows? Maybe I'll still get a call about Flower and the Giant. You never know, but
it could happen.
It could happen. I mean, it's been now 10 years, so I won't hold my breath on that. But they've been known to actually sit on files that long, so you never know. But yeah, so it did turn out that way because then I got hired by Aspirations Publishing in Toronto and to illustrate another woman's book based on her childhood called Under the Desk, and that was my very first professional illustrated book, which I believe you have 1 or 2. Yeah, I didn't give you a whole lot of those, but there's 1 or 2 in there.
Yeah, I can go ahead and share screen now if you would like.
There's a picture of a frightened girl. That's the one. There's a schoolyard. That's from Under the Desk. Those are I think there's a third one, but I can't remember what I gave you.
Yeah. All right, let's see. So we'll go to share screen and we're gonna pop over.
There you go. So that's Maria, the main character in the book. And so since we're looking at this, would you like me to talk about my process and how I worked with?
I'm looking for the right picture. Where are we?
Well, that one's the right picture there. why don't we keep it there just for the moment?
Yep.
And,
Okay.
and if you're cool with it, how about I talk about my process and specifically which developed really from working with this lady. Would you like me to talk about that?
Go for it.
So this lady grew up with, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on her name because she actually goes by pen name. So I know that's not her name, so I don't have the name. And it's been so long now because that book came out 2008. So
It's been a
drawing
minute.
a blank. It's something rude. But anyways, that's not her real name. But anyways, the book is about her. It's loosely based on her childhood. So she would have grown up in the, I believe, 50s, give or take. And she grew up with dyslexia. So this was a story that was loosely based on her childhood of growing up in a time not knowing she had dyslexia when the school system and society itself, most people didn't know what it was. Only a few knew what dyslexia was. It was just starting to come out. So it's based on that, when you don't understand why you're falling behind in school. And so the first thing I did, and what I recommend to other illustrators, it's very important that you do an interview with them. And when I say interview, I mean what you want to find out is you want to find out who they are as a person, just generally, because this is coming from them. The story is coming from them. So the more you understand where it's coming from, the more you can grab onto it. And then, asking certain questions of how they came up with the story and whatever can also help you. So basically picking their brain as much as possible is really key if you really want to knock it out of the park. I mean, any artist can just take instructions from an author and just say, draw me this. And some illustrators think that's what an illustrator's job is here's what the story is about. Here's what this page is about. Just draw me a picture of this that shows what I'm talking about, and that's it. Your job is done. And yeah, on a minimal level, that is our job. But for those that strive to be the best they can be, and to strive for books to be the best they can be, we can go way more than that. And I always strive from the start to go way more than that. Not just to draw what they dictated, but to take it further. And by doing an interview, that helps you do that. Once you have a true understanding of where the story came from, the artists themselves, the whole process of creating the book, all those kind of things. And in her case, I asked about her childhood. And so I incorporated little visual things that weren't in her book. So I took her book further. And with permission from my publisher and her, and I guess sometimes I'm good to talk. I'm good at talking people into things, but I actually talked them into letting me put a little of my childhood in there, just so there was a sense of realism. And unfortunately, I don't have those illustrations. In a little while, maybe I'll show you straight from the book, which I believe I have here. But some of the best examples of what I'm talking about, unfortunately, I'll show you in a minute. But what I did was, I did, as you can see in that photograph of the schoolyard, it's pretty elaborate. There's a lot going on in the back. So are you still there? You're still quiet. I better make sure you're still.
Yeah, no, I'm listening. I'm entranced. I'm enthralled.
Perfect.
Story time.
Is anybody, by the way, has anybody jumped on yet?
I can't see who, but it says we've got 2 people watching. So whoever's watching, go ahead and pop hello into the comments so we know who you are.
Okay, so if you have any questions or if you can't hear me, let me know. So basically what they did, so I asked her certain questions. So I put things from her childhood that weren't in the book, just little visual things to make it, because the more we can, as you've heard, it's just as it is for writing is the same as illustrating. The more we put ourselves into it, the more people will relate to it. So that's what we did. And I think you can take that picture off now.
Okay.
And
did you want me to do another picture, or?
Let's just hold up for a second, and we're just going to do it old school. I'm actually just going to hold up my actual book to the screen for a second and show you an example of putting myself in the book. But again, I must emphasize, ask permission of your
Yeah.
publisher and author if you're going to go that far to put a little of your own whatever. Again, you got to get permission because it's their baby.
Yep.
So there are just 2 seconds here. Because there's one picture in particular that emphasizes how I did that, and I wanted to show it. As soon as I can find it. Sorry about this.
That's
Actually,
all right.
throw another one illustration. I'll just be 2 more seconds. But throw up another one of those if you don't mind.
Not at all. Let me go back to screen share. And I love that you were talking about like taking extra pieces of their childhood, like from the interview and everything, and
Okay.
pulling, because that is, what is this thing? Because there's so much more depth and like, what was their response when they saw it come to life? Like, how did it feel for both of you to see it and to know that you nailed it, and for them to actually see their vision?
Well, that's the trick. Well, that's the tricky thing is with authors, you never know, because sometimes you can knock something out of the park and you're so thrilled with it. And as an artist, that's something you got to get used to. That's another piece of advice is get used to rejection and not take it personally, because as artists, that's why we do it. I mean, artists are just overgrown kids that are going, look what I did. I drew it. That's what we are. We want the approval, right? So of course it's hard because everybody's taste is different and there can even be a miscommunication. So I was lucky with my first book because I really took a lot of allowances. I asked, but I still took a lot of allowances and completely designed these illustrations I did for that first book. I completely designed. I came up with them all. So being that, shockingly, they loved it. They actually, both the author and illustrator, they loved it. So I really lucked out, which isn't always the case. Sometimes they're not going to, and you have to make adjustments. And you have to not take it personally so that you can remain professional. And if you want to stay in the business without, getting depressed because, something you worked on, they weren't quite thrilled with. And if that happens, then you just got to, make corrections and do the best you can to accommodate.
Exactly. Yeah, because you're doing it for them, even though it's your artwork. It's the supporting actor, so to speak, the supporting character, not the main event. That was a really
exactly. Not a minor character. I would like authors to know that though. It's very important you treat your illustrator, especially if you get a good one, that you treat them like an equal partner. I mean, yes, it's your book, but creatively, if you find a good one, why would you tie their hands behind the back? So, and sometimes some authors, not a lot, but especially self-published authors, sometimes, people have personalities and some people have control issues. So when those people with control issues become authors, and even some of them have no artistic inclination whatsoever, will then want to control every aspect and will actually get in the way. But that can be found, of course, in any job, right? A boss that micromanages you. So a little piece of advice for authors is loosen up a little. If you find a really great illustrator, if you've got ideas, share them, absolutely. But don't just control for the sake of controlling. If they're that good, let them do their thing. Give them a little, loosen the rope a little and give them a little slack and see what they do with it. And I think you'll be surprised.
Definitely. Yeah. When I was saying it like a supporting character, I didn't necessarily mean like a minor character at all. It's
no, I know what you meant.
Yeah, just that, the story comes first and the author's vision comes first, but it's definitely a partnership where you want to share the same vision. And so I'm not at a point yet where I've actually found an illustrator for my children's books, but I do understand how important it is when you're collaborating with someone that you have to mesh, you have to really click with each other to be able to bring that magic out and to make that happen.
Exactly. And in a picture book, it's equally as important. And again, I emphasize this because a lot of authors don't realize this. They think that the pictures are less important than the writing. And that is so, as someone who's both equally a writer and illustrator, no.
I mean,
In
you think back
fact,
to your favorite children's books when you were a kid, and what stands out to you the most? It's the story, but the more nostalgic part, and that's really, really embedded within you is the illustrations. Like that's what brings it to life.
the one
Definitely.
who I've patented myself after both as a writer and illustrator, because he does both equally and brilliantly, Chris Olsberg. You know Chris Olsberg?
The name sounds familiar. Help me out.
There's a reason it sounds familiar. Zathura, Jumanji, and the Polar Express.
Yep. Okay.
He did all those books, and he's this brilliant. So when I started, by the way, when I was starting to illustrate for my book Flower and the Giant, before I was going to send out the manuscripts, and even before I knew I was going to get hired as an illustrator, I was researching, and I was researching him as soon as, because I remember liking him as a kid, and so I researched all of his stuff, and basically he was my teacher by doing that. I read all of his books, and he's brilliant. If you look at his stuff, his imagery is so incredible, his artwork, but it's so in symmetry between his words and his writing. He can say so much in a tiny paragraph. So he doesn't have to go, so he lets the illustration tell half the story, and he lets his words tell half the story.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. So that's who I kind of model myself after.
I didn't realize that it was the same person that did Polar Express as Jumanji and Zathura, but I remember having Polar Express, the book, and reading it as a child, and just those illustrations just transported you. Oh, we got some frozen. No.
Every time I'm doing most of the talking, but every time it's your turn and you start to talk, this thing cuts out on us. It's the weirdest time. So I hope everybody enjoyed what she said. I didn't hear it, but
Said I remember having Polar Express, like reading the book as a child, and just the illustrations are so gorgeous. They're so rich, and they just transport you. Like they just take you away.
exactly. And they're not just random. Exactly. And they're very cinematic too. And that's how my illustrations are too, because I'm a movie buff. So my illustrations are also very cinematic. And that's why his books translate so easily into a movie. That's why there's so many movies by his books, because they're practically a movie already. It's just a movie on paper.
Yeah.
So yeah, fantastic. I found the other illustration there. So let me know if it's in the screen there. Can you see that?
Yep. I think maybe bring it up a little bit higher, because we're only catching the yep, a little further away and a little bit higher. Okay.
So I was talking about, I don't know how clear you can see all that, but I was talking about putting myself in the book. So you see there's a picture on the wall behind Maria?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was inspired by my dad because of the character. It's not the real character who, again, I was asking questions. So one other thing. So there's a picture of that's actually the principal. That's actually that guy on the wall when he was in the Navy in World War II, and there's his ship. Actually, that ship, you can't read it there, but it says Winooski. That actually was my dad's ship. And I put that up there and I asked first, but
Yeah.
because I wanted to make that character, because there wasn't a whole lot. I mean, I'm not saying her book was a lovely book, but you can only give so much attention to certain characters. So he's a supporting character, but he's not a major character.
Right.
Although he is, in the sense that he ends up turning from the villain in the book to her greatest ally, which is a one great thing about the book. So I wanted to bring that out, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to bring him out, and she didn't really have too much to say about him, the actual guy it was based on, except that he was scary, but he figured out eventually that she had dyslexia, and it was him who discovered it and helped her in the end. And that's what inspired the book. but I wanted to give him more of a personality, so I basically put my dad in that role. What if my dad was a teacher? So that's an example of putting yourself in the book. And when you're interviewing the author, again, you want to put it's real to them. It might beef up, especially if it's run to their dad. And that's where you can not just draw what they wrote, but you can take it further. You can take the illustration further than the writing. In other words, expand on the story. Then you've really gone above and beyond as an illustrator, and that's when the magic happens.
Right. No, I love that, because that's not something you really think of, at least as solely being a writer. You don't think too much about bringing that level of depth and richness to the illustrations and the the minor characters, or the side or supporting characters, things like that. Like, but to actually find these little visual ways to give them a backstory is just so cool. Like, yeah, that hadn't even occurred to me. That's what
I'm saying. I was just about to pause and say, if I have a blank look at my face, it's because you're breaking up again. I'm catching some of it, but I'm catching more than I did before, so it's okay. It's weird. It's only when you start to speak. Am I breaking up the whole time I'm talking?
No, you've broken up a little bit here and there, but mostly you're coming through all right.
It's just as soon as you start to talk more than 2 seconds, it breaks up. But anyways, it's getting a little better.
Oh no, well, maybe I'll have to do like 2
What
seconds.
else do you want to talk about?
No, that works out
So
fine.
you
You're the
didn't really
one.
realize
You're the expert today, so you should be the one talking.
I don't want it to be too one-sided, that's all. So you said it, did I hear you right that you said that until speaking to me right now, you didn't realize just how far an illustrator can take it? And is that what you were saying?
Yeah, and just I'm amazed at the level of depth that you can bring with just these little visual cues to really bring that extra richness to the characters, to the story.
Exactly. And if you can bring emotion to it, I don't know if it's easy. If it's easy, if you can bring up the picture of the crying girl again, if it's easy. If not, don't worry about it.
Oh no, yeah, just
so that's the other challenge because depending on the book, if you get a book where there's action, then it's easier because obviously it's easier. That's the one. Perfect. No, you had it. Go back. You already had it. Yeah, right there. So as you can see, I put a lot of emotion in that picture because one of my challenges with this book is there's no action in it. So that can be challenging as an illustrator if a story is all just drama. And this story is all drama. So that's another thing, is it's your job as the illustrator to not just draw what they've created, but to bring that drama out. So obviously creating emotion where you can, where it's relevant in the story, is important. And in this part of the story, she still doesn't understand she has dyslexia, and her best friend in class, she's only been barely scooting by cheating off of her work. And a big test has come up, and the little girl didn't go to school that day. So that's Maria looking behind her and realizing that she's about to take the test, and she can't cheat off her friend, and she can't even understand what's being written on the chalkboard, let alone answer the question.
Right.
So this is part of the book where she hasn't discovered she's got dyslexia yet. So it was important to bring out that fear. And in the story, the fear that she did a very good job at writing and showing first, anxiety of going to school every day and feeling there's something wrong with you, but not knowing what it is. And so that fear building, and then climaxing into it on a day like this, where then she's basically going to be busted, caught, and she's falling behind. So yeah, you can take it down if you want.
Well, there's like, I'm just, now that I know what this page of the story is about too, like I'm finding all these little cues, like you know, because at first glance, it's like, oh, it's a crying girl. But with the backstory and knowing what it's about, you see how wide her eyes are. You know, so it's not just sadness, there's fear, the anxiety with the angle of the eyebrows, and the tension with how high her shoulders are. Like there's all
Thank
these
you.
little pieces that come together to really bring that out. It's
Thank you.
awesome.
I appreciate that. And while we have it up, another example of putting, in this case, it wasn't my author, it was my publisher. She was from India. She sadly passed away before our book got, it was published, but just before they started the marketing campaign, unfortunately, she passed away. So her name is Anjali. So I do feel indebted to her. She gave me my first official job. But in addition to putting the author as much as I could in the book, I did a little shout out to her. So if you look behind Maria, there's a map there.
Oh.
And I made sure India was very visible.
Yep, I see.
And
As,
that was
as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, I see it.
yeah. And that was for her. That was a little, little cookie for my publisher. So, if you can do things like that too, it helps obviously please them and helps them feel more a part of the story as well. Not just, and not it be so separate. You write it and I'll illustrate it. You do, as an illustrator, to a certain extent, you do want to have the author involved. So the best way to do that is a pre-interview. So you get on the same page, and then you'll have a better understanding. You do that. But you definitely want it to be collaborative on both sides, not just for the author, but for, as illustrators, don't cut the author out completely either. Don't just say, you'll get them when you'll get them, because, well, first that creates a lot of anxiety in the author, because now, authors hear the horror stories of illustrators that don't complete the work or whatever, all kinds of stories.
Yeah.
So you want to keep them involved, and because it's an equal partnership, the more you can get feedback from the author, as long as they can still not tie your hands and give you a little room to work, then something beautiful can happen.
I love that. Yeah, because the artistry, the artwork, that is the illustrator's area of expertise, and so it makes sense to not tie their hands, to give them the blueprint, so to speak, of what you're looking for, but to let them really make it their own to some extent as well. I like that.
Exactly. I've been really lucky so far with my clients as an illustrator. So I've been really lucky. World of art, this does happen. Sometimes people hire art, but they have control issues and they can't let it go. So as an author, if you have control issues, you definitely want to work on that. For your illustrator, you want to get yourself straight on that front. Otherwise, you could muck up your own book. You could very well muck it up if you don't give them the freedom. A little example of somebody in creative control. This is an illustrator. This was as an artist. Actually, it was when I was working for that corporation. One of the manager's wives, they wanted to open a play center for kids. One of those places where you pay a fee and drop them off for an hour and they play. It's an indoor playground. So they wanted to create murals on the wall or cartooning. So he saw me work on my book, on John, doodling and stuff. So they decided to hire me. And so I was like, because I'm a big grown kid. That's also why I do children's books, because I'm still a kid. I'm an 8-year-old still. So I was like, I get to design a play center. And they were like, yeah. And I said, okay, but if you're gonna let me do it, you're gonna let me design it, right? I'll tell you ahead of time what I'm doing. And I was working on next to zero budget, so that she should have just kept her mouth shut and let me, because I was practically working at cost. And so basically for paint, all they were really doing is giving me paint, but I was going to make paper mache giant mushrooms coming out of the walls, and I was going to do it was a blank space with very minimal equipment. So I was trying to pretty up the pig, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because there's not much there. They had like 6 things to play on, and it was a gray room and a gray carpet, and it was very big. and
So
it had
not very
zero,
stimulating to small mind or young,
no,
not small minds, young minds.
no, exactly. And they had an old teacher's wooden desk that they got for free. They slammed down in front. And I was like, no, we got to take this in the fantasy world so kids can enjoy themselves and parents might want to bring them here. So that's
Yeah.
why I was going to do giant paper mache hanging butterflies, and I was going to do all kinds of stuff. But the only thing they sprung for was the paint. So we started painting at first, and I told Mom ahead of time. I told her, I kind of figured she was going to be a problem because she was a controlling person, controlled him, controlled everybody. But she swore to me she wasn't going to, and that it'd be okay. And sure enough, after I laid out everything in detail what we were going to do, everybody was on board. We were painting the first day. I was painting so the wall looked like stone. They were painting base colors, and I was going behind and adding the actual bricks we were going to create so it looked like inside of a castle. And then I was going to paint windows with fairy tale scenes and like I said, mushrooms coming out of the walls. And I think we only got 2 hours in, and suddenly her control issues just came up. She was like, you know what? I don't like any of this. She's like, we just started. What do you don't like? It looks exactly as we said. It looks cool. Her husband liked it. The neighbors liked it. I just realized I don't like this whole idea, and I just don't like it. So I was let go right there, and they just painted over. They painted the whole room brown, and yeah, they were closed within a month.
Yeah.
So they didn't, because she didn't have a passion for it, and all she wanted to do was control it. So there's a lesson of passion and a lesson about controlling. So yeah, as an author, if you do have control issues, you want to try to nip those in the bud a little bit and be aware of it, so that when you're collaborating with an illustrator who's passionate, that you can loosen up the reins a little. Obviously, you're going to need to be in control to a certain extent, but
Yeah. Like you have control, but don't abuse it, kind of thing.
yeah, don't smother, don't smother it. Don't try to control the whole thing. Don't tie their hands behind the back. Don't ignore the expert's advice. That's another one. A lot of times they forget that. Oh, a lot of time authors or just clients forget that you hire an expert in an area. So if you hire an expert in an area, why would you ignore all of their expertise, right?
Right. They're trying to, oh, see, I can't comprehend, because you hire them as the expert, and it's almost like you're consulting. You're not controlling, you're consulting. They're doing the work, they're consulting you on how you want it to go, but ultimately they're the one doing the job, not you.
Well, exactly.
And there's a reason for that.
Exactly. If you were up to it, you'd be doing it yourself, right? So
Yeah, which you
so
don't have to worry about because you've got both sides covered.
exactly, I'm covered. I believe that was one of the things you wanted to talk about too, was you wanted to talk about why did you ask the question? I think you had it there.
Yeah, I phrased it really nicely in my notes.
It's near the bottom.
Toward the bottom. Kind of just, would you recommend that somebody illustrate their own book so they don't have to deal with that back and forth, like,
Well, it depends.
or to take art classes, if they're not already artistically inclined, to take art classes and do it, or does it make a lot more sense to hire that out?
It would totally depend on the person itself, the author. Some authors are artists that never, just like my story of taking so long to get into professionally. A lot of artists that are just don't see themselves as artists and they just do it in their spare time. So if that's you, and especially with the cost and the issues of getting an illustrator today, finding a good one. Excuse me, get a drink of water here. So if you're artistically inclined, then it's definitely something to consider. You could do traditional artwork, just take a couple months and just see what you can do. And if it turns out well, then because a lot of people still use traditional art in it's about 50-50 now, I would say. Half of authors want digitalized artwork and half want traditional. And those that are new and just, you're going to learn that. You'll see it in the groups. Some people think that of it's only traditional. It's literally what I see. The trend is still, and always has been, 50-50. Half of others want watercolor artists to do their stuff, and the other half want digital. So it's about 50-50.
Okay.
So if you're a traditional artist, you could do that. If you want to, digital artwork is learnable. In fact, anybody interested, you can go to my website and you can learn. I do offer shot courses in Adobe Illustrator. So if you feel you're partially artistically inclined, then yeah, there are people that can teach you. Some of the other courses, there are other people teaching digital art courses, but they're pretty expensive. We're talking hundreds of dollars. Mine is really ridiculously cheap. Or you can self-learn. There's another one. You can self-learn, but you would need months to do that. So it really depends on you. If you have any artistic ability. If you have, I mean, all people have artistic ability. That's what I always told my students, and it's true. But many people haven't practiced, haven't delved into it. So if you've never delved into it, then that's a pretty big undertaking, especially if this book is important to you. Unless you've got money to take a course, be it digital or traditional, and you have 6 months to do that. If you do, then you might want to consider it. But you're probably better off unless that's the case, if you're not as artistic inclined, if you don't have time or money to do all that yourself, then you want to look at it, getting a professional.
Yeah. Now, what is a good way to find an illustrator? Where do you even start?
Well, it's probably how we met, is all these groups. Facebook is full of artists, illustrator groups now.
Mm-hmm.
I even ended up creating my own author illustrator meetup, it's called, on Facebook, but there's a ton of them. I recommend you join them all if you're an author or illustrator. There's literally 20, 30 of them out there. You're probably joined to some of them. So those are a great way to really see the reality of, to get information on both ends, to network. It is overwhelming though, because as we all know, we're living in a very interesting time to be a writer illustrator, because the world has been locked for a year. And that's great, because now everybody's doing that book they always wanted to do. But the whole world again is stuck at home. So you've probably seen in the groups, now when you compete and you apply to, because people post jobs in these groups for illustrators or artists on both ends post. But when that happens, literally hundreds on every post, hundreds and hundreds of illustrators you're competing with. The other dynamic is where the third world countries, because they have a different money system, they're giving us a real run for our money because they're being so competitive in their rates. Mm-hmm. Are you aware of this? Have you seen the rates?
I have not seen the rates for illustration, but my boyfriend's getting his website built by somebody he found on Fiverr, who is, I forget where they're at, but it's a similar situation where it was really, really cheap. So,
and they're over the Philippines.
I think I've heard him speak. I think it's India. Yeah, it sounds like that's what the accent sounds like. Yeah.
Well, those are the ones, and this is what you're going to see. And so almost every day somebody comes on and asks, on one of these groups, asks the same question related to that. And how much is a reasonable charge? What can I expect to charge me? And in today's climate, and I'm not exaggerating, the rates go from $5 an illustration. That's usually the Philippines. A lot of that is clip art though. And obviously a lot of them are not professionals, but some of them really are good. So we're literally $5 all the way up to the top professionals, which can be I'm talking per illustration, $5 per illustration, 500. Now 500 is rare. That's ones who've been published many times and they're experienced professional, they've got 20, 30 books behind them, and even they are now starting to lower the rates. So it's competitive on both ends. The really impressive, amazing, mind-boggling artists are now lowering their rates. And then we got all the third world countries are coming in Asia, all across Asia, and starting from $5. I've had several people say, "Oh, I so wanted to hire you, but a Filipino is going to do it for $20." And I've lowered my rate to a ridiculously low rate, but it still can't compete. I can't do it for $5 or $20.
And you shouldn't be expected to either.
No, but we're having tough times, and so a lot of artists are lowering their rates way below than what's their comfortable level, and it's desperation. And unfortunately, it also is creating another reality where there are still lots of artists or authors that start to understand, especially being in these groups, they start to understand illustrators more and they respect it. But in any field, there are a lot that don't respect it. And so unfortunately, this desperation of illustrators competing on these groups has created a lot of first-time self-published authors that don't respect the art form, that treat it like a cattle call. And you'll hear that term in these groups. Yeah. And they literally will be very, you can see the disrespect in the posts, and it's just like, show me your stuff. A lot of them now are demanding free work just to get the job. So as illustrators, I do recommend you don't do that. There's no reason you should be doing illustrations because you're just giving them free illustrations. It's crazy, right?
Have a portfolio, right?
That they something you created already, that's fine. Yeah. But they're actually asking them, I need a bunny that's going to be like this, and they'll do a post, and they'll say, so send me send me what you got, and I'll pick the one I like most. That's ridiculous, but unfortunately, and this is now a message to the illustrators, stop doing that. It's mostly the third world ones that are doing it because they need the work.
Yeah.
But either way, I'm not just going to pick on third world. It's even over in the rest of the parts of the world that people out of desperation, illustrators, because of this competition, are starting to do that. And you can't let that happen as illustrators. That's a bad trend. Everybody needs to be paid for their work.
Definitely.
And there's no reason for it. You can always just hire someone to do 1 or 2 trial illustrations. You can always do that. So if you're unsure, then just hire an artist to do 1 or 2 and then illustrations. And then if you like them, you can pick them up for the whole book. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, exactly. So and that brings me to another question too, like the idea of all the different styles of illustrations that are out there. Like you've got everything from Dr. Seuss to like Stregonona to, there's so many different styles out there. Now,
that's where the competition is thick as well. And the other issue with that too is authors a lot of times, because they're just regular folk like everybody else, they like certain things and other things they don't, and they lean towards things. And they tend to lean towards things that are popular, mainstream. So a lot of what happens too is we get a lot of authors that are really set on a style. So you'll get authors come in a group and say, I need an illustrator who illustrates like this, and they'll show a favorite illustrator of theirs, someone they could never afford, and they want someone to copy. Now, a lot of illustrators will do that. I don't copy other people's styles. So unfortunately, that can get, for those of us that won't do that, it can be a bit tricky. It starts to reduce some of our jobs, but some will, some don't mind doing that. So that's pretty common too, with all these styles out there. There are definitely calls for already established styles. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see people open their minds up to the styles that aren't maybe mainstream, because there's, as you said, there's so many styles. Incredible stuff.
Everything from, very cartoony to hyper realistic to, everything along the spectrum in between.
Yeah. So the great thing about all of this and everybody being stuck at home and all this coming up is we're seeing in these groups, we're seeing the artwork, and I've been blown away. And as an illustrator, just try not to get too, sometimes that can be a little, you start to, geez, maybe you start to see all these amazing when you start to doubt yourself, right? But I remind the artists, the illustrators out there that, it's all about taste. So one person's work of art is another person's piece of garbage. So what I'm saying is, don't compare your art to anybody else. It's just different art. It's a different style. It may seem on a level higher than yours, but doesn't mean, and I learned this in selling my own artwork, my paintings, when I got into paintings and teaching other people to paint, because some of my students would then want to go and sell their work, and that kind of thing would always come out, the meaning of their work. And as an artist, I remember sometimes I did the painting I was sure I thought was crappy, and then I thought, I'll just put it out there, I'll sell it for $5. And someone comes along and loves it, you can't believe it's $5. And I think it's a piece of crap. So it's all relative. So don't compare yourself. But it is amazing. It's amazing to see all the talent that's coming out, all the styles. It's incredible. It's very inspiring. So I do recommend joining other groups if you haven't. There's tons of them. Most of them have author and illustrator both in the title. That's what you want, because then you're getting both ends.
Yep.
Yeah, join the groups.
Awesome. And the one that I found you in, I will go ahead and I will link that in the comments as well, if anybody's interested, because I think when I joined it, it was, I don't know, like 4 or 6 months ago. I haven't been in there like that long, but there were not that many members when I first joined, and it has exploded. It's a very large group now, and it's really fascinating to see how many people are in there, what they're working on. And it's great for networking, as you were saying.
There were a few. There's still a few that have a lot. If you dig around in them, you will see some that have thousands and thousands of members. We used to have more, but they got shut down for various reasons. Some of them got out of control. They had so many people and flooding in, and it became so unprofessional. So that's another thing I want to talk about too, is if you're going to go to these groups, keep in mind you're getting a big slice of the world, because you'll see all the time where people are like, I'm leaving this group because I don't like this and that. Well, don't leave the group. I mean, you're you're still getting vital information, right? You're seeing what not to do, what to do. They still have a lot, but some people they want a place just for them, and they don't want to see anything unpleasant. But again, if you're going to reach out and want to see what's happening as it relates to illustrating and writing across the world, then that's the giant melting pot of everything, and you're going to get everything in that melting pot. So don't be so sensitive, because a lot of them, and especially with the desperation, a lot of times when you post something, you get a lot of space in those groups, especially in Asia, and that where they're not even asking for an illustrator, they're asking a question, but the feed starts filling up, the comments starts filling up with, I'll be your illustrator. So they didn't even read the post. They just So that puts a bad taste in people's mouths. But amongst all those spammers are real artists and illustrators talking. So be patient with it.
If you've got any other favorite groups too, go ahead and you can link them in the comments here too, so people can kind of explore. Did that come through? Did you hear?
Sorry, you cut out there. What was that?
That's what I thought. If you have any other favorite groups, you can link them in the comments.
Oh, I can't remember them. I can't remember them off the top of it. Most of the groups that I'm in have both author and illustrator in the name. So if you just type that in Facebook, you'll get the list. But I can't. There's such close variations. I can't remember. And like I said, mine is called Author Illustrator Meetup. The smaller. It actually was created kind of for the reason why. Sorry, you're frozen. So
you're breaking up too. No, I think you're back. Okay.
Testing.
Yep.
So Author Illustrator Meetup is a group that I created, and it's a smaller group, and it was meant to be more professional as opposed to some of the ones where it's less. So it's not a lot of rules. It's a little loosey-goosey, but so far it's pretty good. It's very small right now, a few hundred of us, I think. So you can go to Author Illustrator Meetup, or like I said, just go to search panel in Facebook and type Author Illustrator, and a huge list of groups with both of those in the names will pop up, and just join away.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna
really good. Another really, it's called, again, it's too long for me remember. But if you're going to start a group, folks, keep it short so we can remember the names and don't make it similar. That's why I call my author illustrator meetup, because there's no group that sounds like that.
Yep.
So
I
this
remember.
one that I recommend, I can't begin to tell you, there's too many things in it, but it's something like cartoonist, author, illustrator, and a couple other things all in the name. The cartoonist is in there too.
Okay.
But anyways,
Awesome.
lots of good groups out there. Just dig. You'll find it.
Yeah, just dig. They're out there, and there's lots of them. So
When you're in a group, don't be afraid to ask questions. And if you're in multiple groups, it's best to do all groups, because in one group, you may, depending on the time of day, depending on whatever, you might only get 2 answers. But if you put it in the other group, you'll get like 40 answers. So if you're posting, post in multiple groups, especially when it comes to asking questions, when you're picking people's minds. And do that. We see it, it's very prevalent every day. There's somebody asking, and a lot of them are the same kind of question, but still, there's a lot of support out there. So don't be afraid to ask what you consider a stupid question. No, ask away.
yep, there are no stupid questions.
No,
Mostly.
not unless it's the same question being asked over and over.
Yeah.
And that's a stupid question. But no, there's no thing.
You froze. Okay, now you're back.
Did you want to throw up some of the other illustrations from the Little Lost Balloon?
We can definitely do that, because you've got some real pretty ones. So let's.
And I think you wanted to talk about what was my experience as doing a book where I was both writing and illustrating. I believe that was.
Yeah. What was it like to do both? I gotta wait until my thing goes.
Perfect, right there.
Okay.
I don't know if they can see that, but that's a balloon attached to a waterfall, a balloon attached to a log falling off of a waterfall.
So what is the story behind this balloon on a log on a waterfall?
Well, the book is called The Little Lost Balloon, and it's my second children's book. And I both done the whole thing, and yeah, I loved it. I loved it was interesting being both, because again, I started by just illustrating somebody else's story, so that was good practice. I think it was obviously more fun to both write it and illustrate it. And obviously, no hands tied. I didn't have to ask anybody for permission on anything, so that was really good. So if you're in a position, to kind of go back to your question again, if you're in a position where you do have artistic skill and you think you can do it and you have the time and money to do it, then yeah, you might want to do both, because it's a great freedom when you can do both, and you can get so much more symmetry too when it's you doing both. So yeah, this story is, as it's called, The Little Lost Balloon. It's a little balloon that floats away. Well, first he has a dream of he lives at a fair, and with roller coasters and I don't think you have it. That's his dream. He dreams of a big balloon city. And as he's dreaming, or in the morning when he wakes up from his dream, he traveled to a far off land, to a great balloon city. He wakes up to find that his string let go of the cart he's attached to at this fair, and he was floating away. He was lost. So it's this journey where now the wind is taking him and he doesn't know where, and it takes him all kinds of adventures. He gets caught up in a sky full of kites. He gets caught up in a sky full of geese in another section. That waterfall picture you showed, that's where he gets caught on a log and he gets dragged off of a waterfall. But he meets all kinds of great characters, and basically it's a story about following your dreams, and he does. And he literally follows his dreams in the book. And in the end, he doesn't. His dreams come true.
I love
and he
it.
makes friendships, and that's him getting caught on an air balloon, and those are people taking photographs of this little balloon being dragged behind this giant air balloon that's in the shape of a whale. And it's about incorporating.
Creative.
Thank you. And about incorporating again, putting as much as yourself into illustrations is important. So I also put a lot of stuff that's subliminal in there. Like there's a lot of causes, like in the environment is always being a big cause for me. So with the first book and the second book, we planted trees. Um, there's companies you can actually hire where they will plant them, and so with every book, it's the equivalent. When someone buys a book, a tree's planted. So with that book, I was able to plant 200 trees. Not a lot, but it's something. I say it's not a lot because the time it took for me to say 200 trees got chopped down.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, today's world, yeah. But so in addition to, so as you, I don't know if you can see it, but even can you take that down for a second? I want to show you something.
Yep.
I don't know if they're still with us because that was 10 years ago, but I'm sure there's companies like them. Can you see that? It's Eco Libres. Can you see that?
Yep. You got it. Yep. Raise it up. A little higher. All I can see is the ESK.
Anyways, it's called Eco Libres, and basically it's a badge. The company gives you a badge. You prepay for a certain amount of trees, and then so basically the first 200 books paid for 200 trees. So we did that, and sorry, I hate to do this to you, but now bring up that picture that I'm really making you work here, right? You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thanks.
Can you bring that back up with the balloon being dragged behind the other balloon and people taking the picture? There you go.
Yep.
So again, about incorporating yourself or anything that's important to you in illustrations. If you look back, you'll see that farm silo, it says organic food on it. And if you look, there's a field of wind-powered windmills. So again, there's the environment and subliminally, and that's throughout the book too. But there's a lot of subliminal messages of things that are important to me, like the environment.
That's excellent. See, and this is all stuff that I had never considered. So I'm really glad that you're bringing this up and to our attention. And because, again, if you've never done a children's story and worked with an illustrator before, or, even if they have, but not somebody of your caliber or with your mindset, to see what's possible with leveraging the illustrations this way. That's awesome. Exactly. Because I'm all about, using the relatively simple container of a children's story to put forth much larger messages, much larger lessons and things like that. And this just takes that to a whole new level.
Exactly. And that's what I think, certainly what I strive for. And again, certainly my idol, if you will, Chris Olsberg, that's certainly what he was doing, and many other great artists. So I definitely encourage illustrators to push yourself. Don't just draw an illustration. Take it as far as you can take it. And I would say that with writers in any profession, really. I never understood. I grew up in a family where I got it from my dad. It was just a known thing. It wasn't like he taught us. It was just, we learned by example that if you're going to do something, give it 100%, put everything into it. Why go half-assed on anything? And when it comes to writing and especially illustrating, why just draw a picture? I mean, sure, you could just do that, but I mean, like you said, the potential for a powerful story, especially if you've got a good story to begin with, you can take it so much further and emphasize that the emotion and enhance, because there's going to be certain sections of the book that are very powerful. And just like in movies, when you've got all these collaborators, you the manuscript, but when you add music and then the visuals and the acting, you can take that to a whole new level. And with children's book, it's the same way. There really are no limits. You can take it as far as you want.
Right. And the ability to normalize things in such a subtle, subliminal way is just epic.
Exactly.
My gears are turning now. Like, ooh, what kind of subliminal messages could I ask for in my
Exactly, subliminal, or you can also ask for if it takes, because you only can describe so much, especially in the children's books. You got to trim it down so it's readable. But you can actually put things in that obviously I describe that there are people taking pictures, but I took it further by actually showing that in a second panel. But there are things that are a part of the story that maybe never actually make it to the words. So you can also put some of those visually in there. So something that wasn't necessarily had room to put in writing wise, you can put in visually. So there's another opportunity there, is to expand it, tell the story in ways that isn't being told verbally. You can also tell visually.
Exactly. Yeah, that's amazing. And I love, like, when I was little, I loved the books that had lots of like little extras and hidden things, or not necessarily really busy, but kind of along that busy idea, where I mean, your imagination is just stimulated, your curiosity is stimulated, and then as an adult, when you look back on these, like there's a different level of awareness and understanding too. Like, you know, a child reading this book and seeing this illustration is not going to think a whole lot of it, but revisit, you know, the parent, or revisiting once you're older, to be able to see these pieces in it, it just means, it means a lot.
I'm glad you said that, because that's the other thing is I always aspire when I do illustrations, not just to do a great illustration that helps tell the story, but my number one goal is to captivate the reader. Because if you can captivate them, so that's why I create, like you said, all this extra stuff for them to explore. Every time I do an illustration, I always leave tons and tons for them to explore. And this might be a good time to throw up those illustrations, those cards, you know, those ones that are the cards that I sent you. There we go. I was hired, this isn't a children's book, this is a Muslim trading learning game. So I did 5. I'm not sure where they're at now, but I think they decided to go in a totally different direction. But they hired me to, they gave me, it was great. They basically said, show me what you can do. And they didn't give me any, which was also tough, but it was also great for someone like me. But it took a lot of research, and I do also want to talk about that. So this is a good segue into research. I encourage all illustrators, writers, of course, but especially illustrators to research when you're doing, even if it's, whether it's researching themes to the story or to the project, or even just researching other visual researching. It's so key to do that. So what I had to do with this, it was based on a Muslim, on the Muslim, on the Quran. So I had to research and do a crash course myself into the Quran and to the Prophet Muhammad, blessings be upon him. Sorry, I have to say that. That's a term of respect at the end there. That's why I said that. I'm not Muslim, but out of respect for them. For anybody who didn't know that, if whenever you say his name, Muhammad, blessings be, sorry, I'm tripping over my tongue. Blessings be, why am I tripping on this? Upon him. I don't know why that's a tongue twister all of a sudden. You say that out of respect. You have to say that. You can't just say his name. So just a little tidbit of Muslim info for people
We're
out
getting
there.
cultural lessons in here too now. I love it.
Yeah. So
I didn't know that, but I will remember that.
Well, it's not like they're going to tell you to do it, but they'll look at you funny if you don't, because it's almost like saying, because you don't, well, the reason that is, and here's the other challenge I had with this, their Quran says that when they do books about it, whether it's a children's book or whatever, they're not allowed to physically depict Muhammad in any way. So I was given the job to do cards without actually showing Muhammad or showing people, specific people. And there were a bunch of other restrictions. So that's where that comes from, and why you can understand with that kind of restriction, you can't just say his name. You have to say blessings be upon him out of respect. So I wasn't even able to show him. So that was tough. So that took a lot of research, a lot of digging.
Limits of your creativity there.
Yeah, so this illustration, that's actually the mountain where Muhammad, where it all started. Muhammad is their Jesus, basically. And he actually, what I was shocked to find, that all his lessons were practically, was listening to Jesus. They were almost the exact same lessons. It was the same thing he was teaching. And his path was very similar. So the story of Muhammad, who is their prophet, for anybody who doesn't know, that is their Jesus. That's their main, he's not God, he's a prophet, but that's their main guy. The main guys they talk about, that's what the teachings of the Quran are based on, his words. So it all stemmed from the night he went up to the mountain and spoke to God, or through God, talked to God through an angel. They called the angel with six, I forget the name of the angel, but they called it the angel with 600 wings. So you can see the challenge there. I'm not allowed to draw Muhammad. I'm not allowed to draw specific characters. So how do I do that? So it took a lot of creativity and digging deep and researching. And so you'll see there in the desert, you can see footsteps. Do you see the footsteps at the beginning, at the bottom of the illustration, heading towards the mountain?
Yep, right there.
So those are Muhammad's footsteps. And that is literally the mountain, which still is there today. So I got real photographs of the mountain. That's based on the real mountain. And obviously that's my best interpretation of an angel with 600 wings. It's a little hard to draw. So it's more of a hint at that. So that's, you can see how you would approach something like that. And you can start flipping through the other cards if you want, just real quick, just to show them.
And it sounds like you would have to leverage a lot of symbolism and
well, luckily, like I said, if they wanted to be equally collaborative, it might have been a nightmare. But luckily, they just said they didn't have any ideas of their own. So they just said, show us your stuff. That's rare. So I didn't have to do any leveraging that relates to the, my clients, but I did, have to leverage a lot as it relates to the massive amount of rules I had. But it was tough. It was one of the toughest. I mean, think about that. I want you to illustrate something, but you can't illustrate any of the characters. Right. That's what, I mean.
You have to find those visual cues that show what's happening, what has happened, what will happen.
Yeah. And this illustration, I can't remember the exact quote because it was almost a year ago now, I think. But it's a quote where Muhammad, it's more of a metaphor, but in his metaphor, he talks about holding the sun in one hand and the moon in the other, but it's really just a metaphor. And so since I can't draw him or anything, that's what that illustration is it's just rocks. It's a symbol because I can't draw a person. So it's rocks in the shape of hands. I don't know if you can make that out. One is holding the moon and one is holding the sun.
That's beautiful.
Go on to the next one.
Yep. Oh, I have to wait for my little share screen thing to slide back up. There we go. So I can actually reach the tabs.
So research. Oh, and so this is based on reality. There is, now I can't remember which country it is in. I think it's the Philippines. But it is the world's, this is actually a recreation of the world. It's a real place of the world's largest wooden Quran. So it's a Bible you walk into. It's an entire building that is the Bible. So those panels you see back there, they actually turn. So there's actually walkways all behind those. Can you see those panels that those two children are standing in front of? Well, it's a real building, and you can look it up, and that's exactly what it looks like. I scanned it. That's the beauty of digital art. I scanned it. And so yeah, those people are actually walking behind those panels that are way back there, and they could turn them because they're written on both sides. And so the entire building is the Quran. And so I thought to add something, instead of just having all the illustrations be about his teachings, I thought put something modern in there. So I started digging into modern culture of Muslim modern culture, and that's when I stumbled upon this, and immediately was like, let's put this in there. So yeah, so that's how I came up with that one. So research is so key. Researching the content of what the book is about, interviewing your author, that's a form of research. Researching images. Don't just try to rely on your memory, of course. As illustrators, we're blessed that we have endless images to look at online. If we need a certain type of chair from a certain time period, boom. So we're very blessed. We have an infinite library online to go through. So don't be chintzy on the research, whether you're writing or illustrating.
Excellent. No, that's really good advice. And it makes me wonder what, 30, 40 years ago, what did illustrators do when they didn't have Google to be bringing, Google image search?
They went to the library, and then after that, and got what little they could, and then they just made it up after that.
Yep.
I actually remember as a kid being an artist and not realizing I was an artist. Oh yeah, there's another one there. That's based on I don't remember exactly which teaching now. It's fled my mind, but it's a parable from Muhammad talking about kindness to those that suffer and lesser creatures, to anybody, showing kindness. So obviously that's a little girl, and she's with a goat that's injured, and she's showing him tenderness and kindness.
No.
And the background is actually based on real landscapes in that country, where that mountain is, where the Quran and the whole Muslim religion was created.
Nice. It's beautiful.
So I didn't just randomly do, a landscape. I based it on research. So I jumped on that one, and I lost my train of thought of what I was talking about.
Research. And
I think that's where I jumped off. I think
yeah.
I was blown away from it. I think I've covered another research.
Back to that. Okay.
That's good for the cards. I think that's good for now. Let's see you for a bit.
Stop share. Okay, there we go. And we're back.
You're a work of art too, so let's look at that for a while.
Oh gosh, no, that's.
Have we missed any of the questions, or have we basically segued into them all, or is there anything we didn't quite touch on?
I think that's pretty. I mean, there are a couple of questions that we didn't directly address, but in a roundabout way, we've definitely covered.
What are they? Maybe I can expand on them. Unless we're out of time. Are we out of time?
Well, I mean, we didn't really set a specific amount of time, but I did want to cut it at 2 hours maximum, and we're about 15 minutes away from that.
Wow.
I know, it's flown by. This has been a really fun chat.
Me too. We've enjoyed it. Sorry, I've done most of the talking, but when I get talking about, yeah, but I do like back and forth. I'm just really passionate. Once I get on something I'm passionate about,
Oh yeah, no, and it comes through. So, no, I think the only other question that I had that we didn't like really totally fully cover is just like as a writer who's coming to you for illustration or coming to an illustrator, like what does the process look like, and what is it like from the writer's end? Like what can they expect to go through the process, the experience?
Well, with me, we basically already laid it out, and many other experienced professionals, yeah, they're going to want to talk to you about the book. They're going to want to interview you. They're going to want to have some creative freedom to put input. Those are the ones you want, in my opinion. It's just an opinion. There are other illustrators that are a little more straightforward and just do it as a business, so they might not be as involved in research or interviewing, but they just want you to tell them exactly what you want, and then they'll do it. And a lot of them are really good at what they do. So I still think, I saw you shake your head there, and I agree.
I'm like, no, not for me.
Yeah, but I don't want to slash them. I mean, they can do
and some people,
work too.
Some writers probably would work better that way too. Not everybody wants to have that conversation and collaboration experience. Some of them just want to pass it off and get it done. So that works for some people.
Exactly. And so hopefully those on both ends will find each other. It's a perfect match, right? An illustrator who just wants to illustrate and someone who just wants to sell a book. So yeah, that's a good point you brought up. So we'll by going to those groups, and that's a great resource. You can find, if you're patient and you really dig through all the people there, you can find someone that meshes with you. And that would be another thing to do, is make sure there's someone who can mesh with you. If you're passionate, you want a passionate person. Whichever end
know who you are, know how you work,